Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Race Week review of what was the Spanish Grand Prix. Now, it wasn't the most thrilling of races, but it did certainly have some stories worth talking about. Let's go in to the race review. So, the lights went out and Valtteri Bottas, whilst Lewis Hamilton led the way, Valtteri Bottas was swamped going into the first corner. He was passed by Max Verstappen going into turn 1, and then Lance Stroll really sent it down the inside, and he was able to get through as well. Almost Sergio Perez managed to get through, but Bottas was able to hang it around the outside, and he was able to defend his position. They all managed to make it through the first corner without any incident. At the end of the first lap, it was Hamilton led, Verstappen, Stroll, Bottas and Perez. Albon was in 6th. And the main interest in the early laps was how long would it take for Valtteri Bottas to pass Lance Stroll? I mean, the time he spent behind Lance Stroll could have proved to be quite critical for him in the end. But in the end, he managed to get past. It took a few laps, but it was crucial he got that racing point out the way to remain a factor in this race. In the early laps, Verstappen was going with Lewis, but then he started to struggle with his tyres towards the end of his first stint, and he started to really drop back, and then it was him that was the first to blink. He came out of the front runners. Albon had come in for hards before, which was a very poor strategy from Red Bull, to be honest. Verstappen came in a few laps later for the soft compound tyre, and immediately Mercedes responded by double stacking their two cars. Whilst we had some interesting battling in the midfield between the AlphaTauris, you had Leclerc and Norris battling that, once again providing some good action. Whenever these two go on track together, they always seem to put on a show. But that was swiftly ended when Charles Leclerc's engine seized due to an electrical fault. That put him into a spin, and he eventually came into the pits because he'd undone his belt, thinking that he was out of the race and that he was stranded there. But he came into the pits, but the problem proved to be terminal. Real shame for Charles, as he was driving quite well, and he could really, considering the one stop that his teammate did, he could really have gotten a good result. It was a real shame that it ended. And then we had a threat of rain towards the middle of the race. The clouds were looking very angry towards... They were actually looking like... Earlier in the week, there was a massive storm here in the UK. And then it reminded me of that there was a massive storm coming. But unfortunately, the clouds... This massive storm, which was clearly present, did not hit the track, but there was some more interest in the rest of the race. Lewis Hamilton came into the pits, and he did his final stop on the medium tyres. He wanted to avoid the soft tyre. Max Verstappen had pitted in earlier and had to prevent an undercut from Bottas. Bottas switched to the softs, which the team then said was a mistake, because as soon as he started to get close to Verstappen, the dirty air and the soft tyres did not mix very well, and then that meant that he had no chance of catching. They stated in an interview that had he switched to the medium tyre, he maybe could have caught Bottas, but he pitted for another set of the softs for the fastest lap at the end, which he eventually got. But then Sebastian Vettel was on his one-stop strategy, and he was in 5th behind Sergio Perez, who had a time penalty for a blue flag infringement. Perez was also one-stopping, and he drove very well with that one-stop. But then Vettel started to gradually fall down the order. He was first passed by Lance Stroll, and then he was passed by Carlos Sainz. And he was caught up by the train of Albon, Norris, Gasly, Ricciardo, but in the end they could not manage to pass him, and he managed to defend 7th place. It was a good drive from Vettel, But it was Lewis Hamilton who took the victory, and he stated that he felt like he was in a daze during the race. He felt like he was in his own world, and he was absolutely loving it. He felt like he was in full control of the race, and that was he said in an interview that was a feeling that he really enjoyed. He took the win and has extended his championship lead. He really is looking good for a 7th world title this year, isn't he? I mean, there is still a long way to go, but Lewis Hamilton is still in the lead of the standing. I'm just trying to find. I may have to do a bit of maths myself if I can't find it, because they always take a little bit of a while to update the standings on these things. But I've got them up now. And he has a 37-point lead now. Back to Max Verstappen in second. So Lewis Hamilton took the win. I'll be going through the full standings later on. But Lewis Hamilton took the win ahead of Verstappen. Bottas finished in third ahead of Lance Stroll, who's now 5th in the standings after he actually inherited 4th after Perez's time penalty. Then you have Carlos Sainz finishing in 6th. Sebastian Vettel got driver of the day in 7th. Then you have Alex Albon, another good drive for Pierre Gasly, with Lando Norris rounding out the top 10. Then you have Ricciardo, who just missed out on points. He was a bit disappointed, just missed out on points. Then you had Danny Kvyat, who also had a time penalty for ignoring blue flags. Then you had Ocon, Raikkonen, Magnussen, Giovinazzi, Russell, Latifi and Grosjean, with Leclerc as the only retirement of the race. We also had the junior divisions take place today. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the main feeder series, the Formula 2 race, which took place this morning. And it was an interesting one in terms of tyre management. It was Luca Giotto who had reverse grid pole, but Felipe Drugovich went straight into the lead at the first corner. And he already has one sprint race win this season, but he instantly took the lead, and obviously he was hoping to repeat that. He led from Giotto, and Callum Ilott was in third, and he looked like he was going to mount a challenge on Luca Giotto in the early stages. Whilst in the midfield he had Nikita Mazepin on a charge, he managed to pass Louis Delatrez, and then he passed Robert Schwartzman, who was struggling on his tyres. Became the first of many to drop off the cliff on his tyres. Felipe Drugovich was in the lead of the race from Giotto, but then Ilott managed to get a run on Giotto, but then his pace just dropped off. As you can see further back in the top 10, you have Yuki Tsunoda making a move on Guan Yu Zhou. I believe this was for 5th place. But then Ilott really started to struggle, and he was passed by Mick Schumacher, who took the final spot on the podium. Guan Yu Zhou was also struggling. Here you can see him getting passed by Nobuharu Matsushita. But Ilott then was gradually falling back through the top 10. And it looks like he was going to drop out of the points. As you can see, Yuki Tsunoda, he managed to make it around the outside of turn 4. But it was Felipe Drugovich who took the victory for his second sprint race victory. And he is really proving to absolutely love this car. I think it was Alex Brundle who made a point in the first weekend that sometimes when you go up the ranks in a faster car, you get better. And maybe that's what's happening with Drugovich. I mean, you have to remember, he did win Euro Formula quite convincingly as well the year before Formula 3 last year. I mean, who knows where he could have finished had he been in like a Prima or a High-Tech. But he is showing himself to be fast in Formula 2 this year. And then you had a battle for the final point. You had Lundgaard and Ilott going into the final chicane. Lundgaard managed to get the place, but he passed him off the track, which meant that he received a penalty, and then that dropped him behind Ilott. So at least Ilott got the final point, and he managed to extend his gap to Schwartzman by a point. But still, it was kind of an anomaly in the title fight this sprint race with so many drivers, and they weren't the only ones that dropped off the cliff. You had Schwartzman in the end actually pitted. Then you had Guan Yu Zhu, Dan Ticktum as well, also dropping down off the cliff as a result of their tyre wear. But it was an interesting sprint race in Formula 2, and in the drivers' standings, despite losing 1 point to Ilott, Schwartzman did take points back from Ilott this weekend after that crazy feature race yesterday. He's 18 points behind. Christian Lundgaard, after a tough weekend, is falling behind in third, then ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. Could Yuki Tsunoda be in this title fight going forward? Mick Schumacher is in fifth. Guan Yu Zhu, when will he get some luck? Arguably, he should be up. It has to be said, Zhu should be up there with Ilott and Schwartzman. But he is struggling. After losing an easy race win in the first race, and then he's shown pace, but he's just had a lot of bad luck. Then you have Nikita Mazepin in 7th, Felipe Drugovich 8th after his 2 race wins, Louis Delatrese in 9th, Dan Ticktum in 10th is the drivers' standings. And taking a look at the race, I haven't got the race result yet. Need to do that. It was Drugovich winning from Giotto, Schumacher, Tsunoda, Matsushita, Mazepin, Piquet getting his first 2 points in Formula 2. Then you have Ilott getting the fun point with Delatrese and Ticktum running at the top 10, but remember, points so you go down to 8th place in the sprint races. Then you had Lundgaard, Nissany, Schwartzman, Zhu, Armstrong, Markelov, Daruvala, Aitken, Alesi, Samai and Sato. All 21 cars that started the race finished, and of course there was a driver missing from the race, Sean Galale. Best wishes to his recovery and hope that we see him back on the track at Spa and as soon as possible. Kicking off, the day kicked off with the Formula 3 race, and it was a fairly interesting race. But it was fairly tricky to overtake. At the start of the race, Oscar Piastri it was Matteo Nannini who had reverse grid pole, and at the start, Alex Peroni got alongside going into the first corner. But then Oscar Piastri managed to switch back through turn 3, and then he managed to get past the pair of them, with Nannini then managing to get past Peroni. But the safety car was out immediately. Hauger and Pulcini made contact at the first corner, and in avoidance, Caldwell and Futrell went into the gravel and were beached. And they were both out of the race, and the safety car came out. The safety car then did come in the end again, and Peroni managed to get past Nannini. But the DRS train made it quite difficult for anyone to make any overtakes. Later on, the safety car came out again as Malvestiti went off into the gravel. On the restart, Peroni was keeping Piastri honest, but Piastri did extend his gap, and he managed to maintain the lead, and he took victory in the second race in Barcelona. He took the victory, finishing ahead of Peroni, but not Alessandro. I keep mistaking from. It's easy to say his father. Matteo Nannini getting his and Jensen's first pony of the season. What a drive from him, and fending off Richard Verschoor, who did keep him honest in the closing laps. Logan Sargent does maintain his lead, but the gap is now 1 point. Then you have Teo Porcher, Liam Lawson, Enzo Fittipaldi, David Beckman, and Jake Hughes rounding out the point scorers. Then you had Novalak, Smolia, Fernandez, Williams, Duan, Zendelli, Das, Fraga, Stanek, Viscal, Vesti fought his way up to 21st after having to start near the back due to his retirement yesterday. You had Dunner, Flirge, Pulcini, Schumacher, Hauger. Then the retirements were Malvestiti, Deleda, Futrell and Caldwell. So, taking a look at the drivers' standings, and it is still Logan Sargent leading the way by 1 point back to Oscar Piastri in second. Liam Lawson and David Beckman seem to be in a battle for third in the standings. Lawson is 5.5 points, or 4.5 points ahead of Beckman. Then you have Pourchaire, who's behind in 5th. Then you have Vesti, who's really starting to fall back in the title fight. Then you have Hughes, Peroni, Verschoor, and Novalak rounding out the top 10. So now let's have a look at a team by team. Let's talk about the race for each. How do I say this? Let's do a team by team review of the Spanish Grand Prix. As usual, this will be done in reverse constructors order. Fairly anonymous day for them. We didn't really see much of the two Williams, did we? But both cars went to the finish, but they are obviously awaiting their first point of the season. They really did not deliver on their Friday pace, did they? They spent the race battling with the Alfa Romeos. I mean, there was a bit of a moment with Romain Grosjean almost making contact at high speed with Kimi Räikkönen. He really needs to cut down on that defence. But another bad day for Haas. Similar things could be said for Alfa Romeo. They have been nowhere this year, especially compared to last year. So far, they've got a lot of work to do. But a fairly anonymous day, other than a few team radio messages from Kimi Räikkönen. The car showed good pace again, and I believe Pierre Gasly may have been a little bit disappointed not to get higher than 9, but still that's a good result. Danny Kvyat's chance of points were ended by that time penalty. But still, another 2 points. Pierre Gasly is proving to have a very good season. I think it can be said it's a very disappointing weekend for Renault. After a terrible qualifying, both cars being out in Q2, 13th and 15th on the grid, and then not scoring any points. A day to forget for the guys in black and yellow. It could be said that Vettel did do a good job to salvage something from this race for Ferrari, but they have dropped behind McLaren and Racing Point in the constructors, which you could say wouldn't have happened had Charles Leclerc not had that spin due to his engine failure. Interesting question. Where has their pace from Austria gone, as soon as they showed no signs of challenging the Racing Points at the top of the midfield? But they still got a double point score finish, so it's a better showing than Silverstone last week, the 70th anniversary race. Lando Norris would have been a bit disappointed with 10th, but Carlos Sainz finished in 6th. A good drive from him. I'd say this was probably the race where they first maximised what they were capable of. Taking 4th and 5th, I don't think they had much of a chance to finish any higher today. And a good day all round for Racing Point. Sergio Perez making a one-stop work was no surprise, because obviously we know that he is the master of saving tyres. Lance Stroll, though, finished in 4th as a result of Perez's penalty, but I think Racing Point will be happy with today. Red Bull, I think Max Verstappen was fairly happy. He believes that he did the best he could. He split the two Mercedes, and obviously he knew there was no way that he was going to catch Lewis Hamilton today. But I think there will be a few words in the debrief about what happened with Alex Albon, seen as it was a huge mistake to pit him early and put him onto the hard tyre, which put Alex on the back foot. Alex did still make some good moves during the race and take some good risks with his overtaking, but there might be a few words as to why they put him on that strategy. But they proved to be bulletproof in the pit stops. A 1.9 second stop for Verstappen, which proved to be crucial in the end because that managed to allowed him to clear the racing points. But Verstappen did the best he could and he was happy with that. Well, it wasn't a 1-2, but still, they are obviously going to be going home celebrating. They are clearly in the box seat to take both drivers' standings, and it was an utterly dominant showing from Lewis Hamilton. Once again, like as he said in his interview, he stated that he was in a daze. He felt so comfortable. It must feel so good to have a car like this that you know will work with you. And that it must have felt so good for Lewis to be out in front, living the life up there, and being in full control of the race. But a good day for Mercedes, it could be said. And talking about the driver's standings, I'm going to leave the picture of the Mercedes up, because that's the car that's currently leading the driver's standings. Lewis Hamilton leads the way by 37 points back to Max Verstappen in second. Then you have Valtteri Bottas in third, with Charles Leclerc still in fourth despite his DNF today on 45 points. Then you have Lance Stroll in fifth, level for fifth place with Alex Albon. Lando Norris has dropped to seventh. Then you have Sergio Perez in eighth. I mean, his position in the championship has been really damaged by having to miss two races. Then you have Carlos Sainz in ninth, Daniel Ricciardo in 10th, Sebastian Vettel's now in 11th, knocking on the door of the top 10. Then you have, he's level on points with Esteban Ocon. Then you have Pierre Gasly in 13th on 14 points. Then you have Nico Hulkenberg on 6th, Antonio Giovinazzi and Danny Kvyat level on 2 points. Then you have Kevin Magnussen, Kimi Raikkonen, Nicholas Latifi, George Russell and Romain Grosjean yet to score a point. But that is it from the Sunday recap. Be sure to join us where we will analyse this race further on Thursday and also preview the Indianapolis 500 in the midweek show, which there will be coverage of next week. There will be a post-race review after the Indy 500. But thank you very much for watching, and also stay tuned for more RaceWeek content, such as maybe potentially a website coming in the next month or so. But thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next week for the midweek show and the Indy 500. Coverage of the Indy 500. Goodbye.